everyone. Welcome to another edition of 2AR Soul Roundup News. My name is Richard Espinoza. I'm your host. We are your primary source for Second Amendment news, whether it be good, bad, or ugly, whether it be important legislation in blue states or red states, whatever the case may be, we keep you informed on important Second Amendment news that matters. Today we're going to be talking about a Supreme Court case that will take place sometime next year. It's a Supreme Court case that relates to the state of Hawaii in the case of Wolford versus Lopez. In this case, the plaintiff will be Jason Wolford, who will be challenging the defendant, which in this case is the Attorney General of Hawaii, Ann Lopez, who is known to be rabidly anti-gun, who has a strong anti-gun background. This case will determine on whether or not do law-abiding gun owners have a right to carry a firearm on private property. We're going to discuss the details of the case, and I'm going to read it to you so you can get a clear understanding on whether or not do you agree or disagree on this lawsuit. So I have the script right here and I'm going to read it to you. So here's what it says right here. And it says, the Supreme Court has agreed to hear another major case on gun rights, taking up the constitutionality of Hawaii law that bans the possession of handguns on private property unless the property owner has consented. The justices announced Friday morning that they are adding the Second Amendment case, Wolford versus Lopez, to their docket for this term. Oral argument is expected earlier next year. The Hawaii law under review bars people from carrying guns in various places open to the public, including beaches, parks, bars, restaurants that serve alcohol, and the other commercial establishments like stores. The law says that people can carry guns only with the permission of the property owner. The case is the High Court's latest efforts to sort through the fallout from their 2022 ruling that looked at the history and tradition of gun regulations to strike down New York's restrictive laws for insurance of handgun permits, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. Since that 6-3 ruling 3 years ago, lower courts have come to dispute the results as they attempt to shift through the historical evidence to decide if modern firearm laws and regulations have relevant analogs imposed in the U.S. in the 18th and 19th centuries. Last year, the justices signaled the willingness to uphold some regulations with no direct pressure from the era when they declared 8-1 that federal laws preventing people with domestic abuse restraining orders from owning guns was constitutional. Now, let's talk a little bit about that last phase I just mentioned. First of all, we have to understand that red flag laws are not what most people think. The problem with red flag laws is that it violates due process. In other words, people can be accused of anything. You can accuse anybody of anything without due process. So in other words, under a constitutional republic, you have to go through every step of the process before you can determine somebody's guilt or innocence. under a democracy government like Venezuela or Nicaragua or Colombia, it's all majority rules. In other words, it takes 7 out of 13 to say that you're guilty. Majority rules, they take your guns away because they believe that you're a spousal abuser. Well, here's the thing on that. You have to go through the process first before you determine somebody should get their guns taken away or not. If they're found guilty in the court of law and the evidence is there, then by all means they need to take it away from a dangerous person. Now, I'm all for taking guns away from criminals. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, dangerous criminals should not have guns. If you're a convicted felon, you should not have guns. But if you're a non-violent felon, in this case, tax evasion, if you commit tax evasion, that should not resent to you losing your Second Amendment rights. Because as far as I'm concerned, tax evasion should be a misdemeanor, not a felony as far as I'm concerned. It's not like the government has cheated anybody out of money. So tax evasion is basically a harmless crime. It's declared as a felony, but not a violent felony. For those who have violent felonies like rapists, child molesters, or child abusers, or spousal abusers, yeah, they should be denied to own a gun as long as they go through the processing system. And as long as they go through every step of the processing system and they're found guilty in a court of law, then yeah. But they also have a right to appeal. So you have to go through every step of the process before you determine somebody's guilt or innocence, if they should get their guns taken away or not. But now let's go back to Hawaii's law. Now, what this case is about between Wolford and Lopez, Hawaii wants to restrict people from carrying a firearm in public places like libraries, beaches, parks, federal buildings. They're trying to restrict them for that. But then they're also arguing that law-abiding gun owners should not carry guns on private property unless they get the permission from the property owner or the business owner. As long as they consent to it, then it's okay. But the question is, does Hawaii really mean it? For all we know, at some point, they could tell owners that, nope, you're not allowed to. It's our laws, our rules. You cannot do that. Well, first of all, owners do have a right not to allow their customers to carry guns in their store or their restaurant or their bar. They have that right, as long as they put a sign that says no firearms allowed. Now, if you carry a firearm on a daily basis and you're a law-abiding gun owner and you've done nothing wrong, just don't do business with places that don't allow you to carry a firearm, because all they're doing is hurting themselves. They're not hurting you, they're hurting themselves. And then they will be the ones that end up losing money. So what you want to do is just don't do business with them. Just walk away and go somewhere where they respect your rights. As much as I hate to say it, they do have that right to tell you, no, you can, or yeah, we welcome you. It's their right. However, let's go back to a law in Tennessee where restaurant owners that serve alcohol were forbidden to allow customers to carry a gun That was the law. But look what that led to. First, let me say, yeah, I understand that alcohol and firearms don't mix, just like drinking and driving doesn't. It's common sense that you don't drink and drive, because if you drink and drive, you're going to kill yourself or you're going to kill somebody. And then you're going to go to prison, and then you're going to be shamed for life. Now, same thing with a firearm. You can get drunk and you carry a firearm. You might shoot yourself, or you might shoot somebody accidentally, or drop your gun and the gun might go off. So it's common sense that you don't drink and fire a firearm. Now, what should be is that you can carry your firearm into a bar as long as you don't drink. I'm all for that because, again, alcohol and firearms don't mix, just like drinking and driving, and it's common sense. But let's talk about an incident that happened in Tennessee back in 2009, a tragic story of Ben Gosher, who was shot and killed by his wife's stalker. If you heard the story of Nikki Gosher and her husband Ben owned a karaoke business. And where they were doing their business is that they forbidded people from carrying a firearm at a bar and grill, because under Tennessee law, you're not allowed to carry a firearm where they serve alcohol. So, Nikki Gosher left her gun in her car, knowing that it could be a risk or she could be in danger. But even before that, she had a stalker by the name of Hank Wise. This was a man who was constantly bugging her, trying to go on a date with her, made obscene messages on social media. And I believe that Nikki Gosher also blocked him on Facebook and blocked him from going into her websites because she had enough of this guy. She kept on telling this guy that she's happily married, and she told him to leave her alone. But Hank Wise wouldn't take no for an answer. And because he knew that Nikki's husband Ben was in the way of him. But because the sign said no firearms allowed, what happened? Hank Wise used a .45 caliber pistol to gun down Ben Gosher and killed him in cold blood. Now, if Nikki Gosher would have had her gun on her, there could have been a chance she could have saved her husband's life. Or let alone, Ben Gosher could have saved his life if he carried his firearm. But because they obeyed the law, and they put their gun in the car and locked it up, Hank Wise knew that nobody would be armed, and he was able to commit the heinous murder. But luckily, a group of Marines that were there that night were able to tackle him to the ground. And ever since then, Nikki Gosher has been a crusader in fighting against gun-free zones. She also wrote 2 books about her horrible tragic that she went through. And she has been fighting ever since then, and she's been continuing to fight. And unfortunately, to this day, her stalker, Hank Wise, who is serving time in prison, I think he only got 25 years, if I'm not mistaken. He should have gotten life in prison, but he didn't get life in prison. But he was constantly sending her love letters, Valentine cards, Christmas cards. And the guy just doesn't have a clue. She doesn't love him. But he continues doing this to agitate her. So that goes to show you that gun-free zones are simply a death trap. Now again, as I mentioned, owners have that right to tell their customers that they cannot carry a gun in their business. It's not up to the state to dictate to the owner on what they can and cannot do in their restaurant. Now, I was in Montana, in Billings, Montana this year, and I went to a restaurant that said no firearms allowed. I walked out of there because I am not going to do business with a restaurant that's not going to allow anybody to carry a firearm, because all you're doing is inviting trouble. So when a criminal sees that sign, they know that nobody's going to be armed, and therefore they're going to commit their dirty deed. So the least you can do is just don't do business with them. Now, I hope that the case for Wolford versus Lopez goes in the favor of Wolford, that they can carry a firearm in public places. Now, as far as in private businesses, in private places, like a store or a restaurant, that is up to the owner or the store management or the corporate management. And if they don't allow you, then don't do business with them. It's that simple, because they're just hurting themselves. And you just get the word out and tell your friends and neighbors and your family, don't go to this place because they don't allow you to carry your firearm. That way you're hurting them. They're just hurting themselves for not allowing you to. And then what would happen if some robber or some crook goes in there, shoots the place up and robbing everybody? Then they'll end up being negligent. Then they'll be the ones who'll be sued because they didn't allow a law-abiding citizen to carry a firearm. And when they could have stopped this. The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I should be allowed to carry my gun wherever I go, as long as I don't have no criminal records, which I don't. But like in California, where I once lived, in the state of California, it's illegal to carry a firearm in your glove compartment. You're not allowed to do that in California. And as far as I'm concerned, it's your personal property, and you have a right to do that. I pay my insurance, I pay my registration, it's my car. It's not your right to tell me that I don't have that right, because I do. It's my personal property. Take, for example, under the law, and not very many people know this, but let's say if you own a motorhome and you own a travel trailer and a truck with a camper, legally, you can carry a firearm with you under your seat or have it in a holster, because it's declared as your legal residence. If you mark it down on your registration that your motorhome, your travel trailer, or your camper, you make sure you have it down as your first residence or your second residence, so that way you cannot be penalized. But technically, it is declared your residence, and they have no right to deny you that right. That means if you traveled your motorhome into a blue state, whether it be New York, Minnesota, or New Mexico, which are blue states when it comes to being anti-Second Amendment, you have a right to carry a gun in your motorhome or in your truck that's towing your traveler trailer, or a truck with a camper, because it's declared as your legal residence as long as you have it down as your legal residence. Whether it be your first residence or your second residence, you can legally do that. That also means that you cannot, you have a right not to allow law enforcement to go inside your motorhome. They can pull you over, but they can't come in. They can't come in because it's declared as your legal residence. And they have to get a search warrant if they have to go in there. Now they can ask you to step outside, that's fine, but they can't go in because it is your residence. And even if you carry a restricted firearm into a blue state, it is your residence, and therefore they cannot do nothing about it. And if they do, they can get sued. So that is something to remember whenever you travel. Whenever you're driving your motorhome, your travel trailer, or your truck with a camper, make sure you have it as your legal residence, as your second residence or your first residence. But technically by law, it is declared your residence. But to be on the safe side, just to be on the safe side, make sure you have it down as one of your residences, so that way you cannot get penalized. Well, that is it for 2A Arsenal Roundup News. If you have any important legislation that you want to bring to my attention, feel free to send me an email at rjespinoza, that's ESPINOZA, roundupnews@gmail.com. Tell me your name, tell me your state that you're from, tell me what the legislation is about. Will it affect your Second Amendment rights? Will it benefit your Second Amendment rights? Tell me about it. Let me know about it, and I will be sure to broadcast it on my next podcast. Help me help you. Help me be your voice, because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to fight for you, to help fight for your rights, and to keep you informed. So allow me to help you. All you got to do is just send me an email, and then I will make sure that the word will get out. Until then, be armed, be vigilant, be safe, carry a firearm to protect your home and your community. And remember, the Second Amendment is just not about guns, it's all about freedom. And you have the freedom to protect your home, your loved ones, your family, and your friends from any danger.